Scotty says I can't smoke this cigarette in here. I'm gonna at least put it in my fucking mouth. How about that?
Don't smoke my fucking
What you gonna do about that? I don't know why I'm wearing these glasses. I don't need them. In fact, I think they're a prescription that's wrong for me. It makes it hard to see. Well, let's do this shit, eh? Jordan Peterson, the once obscure Canadian psychologist who rose to prominence when he opposed Canada's Bill C-16, which he claimed would compel speech by mandating the use of gender-neutral pronouns. Didn't seem to matter what Bill 16 actually said, was that it would add gender identity or expression to the list of prohibited grounds for discrimination under the Canadian Human Rights Act. The bill itself did not explicitly mandate specific speech, but rather sought to protect individuals from discrimination and harassment based on their gender identity. Peterson's interpretation that the bill would effectively criminalize the refusal to use preferred pronouns was fiercely contested by legal experts and advocates, many of whom argue that his concerns were unfounded and represented a misreading of the legislation. I want to be clear, I share Peterson's opposition to this bill, which I think is overly broad in its approach and lacks sufficient safeguards to prevent potential overreach in its application. While I acknowledge the importance of protecting individuals from discrimination, I believe that legislation of this kind must strike a careful balance between safeguarding rights and preserving free expression. Bill C-16, in my view, opens the door to unintended consequences, including the possibility of vague or subjective interpretations that could chill legitimate free speech or lead to punitive measures for those engaging in good faith discussions. Furthermore, I'm of the belief that when it comes to challenging bigotry and discrimination, the clumsiest means of opposition tends to be that of legal fiat. It seems that these well-meaning pieces of legislation all too often only serve to entrench the very bigotry that they seek to oppose by giving said bigots the opportunity to glom onto narratives that they are being oppressed by an overreaching government or silenced by some authoritarian regime. And that in turn always gives the bigots the opportunity to reframe themselves as martyrs for free speech, galvanizing support for their stupid fucking causes. Now that is not to say there aren't instances where legislation is important, when laws are clearly outlined in terms of their scope, application, and limitations. They can play a critical role in protecting vulnerable groups and setting societal norms against harmful behaviors, right? Anti-discrimination laws that address specific and demonstrable harm, such as denying someone employment or housing or public accommodations, are necessary tools for fostering equality and fairness. However, when laws venture into the realm of regulating speech or compelling expression, they require exceptional clarity to avoid unintended consequences and ensure that they do not infringe on fundamental freedoms. Ultimately, Canada's C-16 bill passed into law, and as of January of 2025, there have been no reported cases in Canada where individuals have faced legal penalties solely for using incorrect pronouns under the bill. Although it is worth noting that Ontario's Human Rights Commission has indicated that using wrong pronouns repeatedly after being made aware of a person's preferred pronouns might still amount to harassment. However, legal experts have clarified that such cases would be assessed within a broader context of discriminatory or harassing behavior rather than isolated incidents of misgendering. Ultimately, I do agree with Peterson that this is too far-reaching. While I personally choose to identify trans people by their preferred pronouns, I think requiring others to do so is a step too far in mandating personal speech and infringes upon the principle of free expression. Respect for others, including using their preferred pronouns, should stem from genuine understanding and courtesy, not from legal obligation or fear of punitive consequences. Compelling speech, even for a well-intentioned cause, risks setting a dangerous precedent where the state can dictate language and enforce ideological conformity. The fact that Peterson so drastically exaggerated the effects of C16 and its broader cultural implications, you would think that would go a lot further towards discrediting him than it actually has. I mean, the man's career as a public intellectual started with the gross exaggeration of a relatively modest legal amendment, transforming it into a rallying cry against an imagined Orwellian dystopia. His framing of Bill C-16 as a catastrophic overreach that would usher in compelled speech laws on a massive scale was not only misleading, but was largely unsupported by legal analysis and subsequent enforcement of the law. This exaggeration should have undermined his credibility as a serious thinker, at least a little bit. He had every opportunity to refine his critique, to clarify his position, to introduce a little nuance into the discussion, yet at every turn, he resisted doing any of that, preferring to oppose a caricature of the actual legislation, using his credibility as a scholar to amplify a distorted narrative that better suited his ideological crusade. By doubling down on hyperbole and dramatic predictions, rather than engaging with the law and its implications in good faith, Peterson chose to prioritize polemics over precision. His refusal to acknowledge or address the more measured criticisms of his position speaks not to a commitment to intellectual rigor, but a calculated strategy of appealing to the fears and frustrations of his audience. And it's a trick that he has been pulling ever since. Jordan Peterson was born on June 12, 1962, in Fairview, Alberta, Canada, the eldest of 3 children. He grew up in a modest household with his father, who was a school teacher, and his mother, who was a librarian. As a teenager, Peterson developed a fascination with literature, philosophy, and religion, immersing himself in the works of George Orwell and Aldous Huxley and Carl Jung. He also became interested in politics and the ideological struggles of the 20th century. After high school, Peterson studied political science and English literature at Grand Prairie Regional College, where he wrestled with existential questions about humanity's capacity for cruelty and suffering. He later transferred to the University of Alberta, earning a degree in political science in 1982. He spent a year traveling Europe, which deepened his interest in the connection between culture and psychology, prompting him to return to Alberta to study psychology, earned another bachelor's degree in 1984, and then Peterson pursued a PhD in clinical psychology at McGill University, focusing on aggression and substance abuse under psychologist Robert O. Pill. Robert O. Pill. Seems like there's almost like a pun somewhere in there, but I can't figure out what it is. Influenced by thinkers like Nietzsche, Jung, and Dostoevsky, Peterson began developing the eclectic and often controversial ideas that he has about meaning and human behavior, and that would later make him a very polarizing public figure. Before his emergence as a public intellectual in the wake of the aforementioned C-16 bill, Peterson was primarily known as an academic and a clinical psychologist. In 1998, he accepted a faculty position at Harvard University. I think I heard of that one, where he taught and continued research on topics like aggression, dominance hierarchies, and creative achievement. While his work gained respect in academic circles, it was far from mainstream recognition. In 2001, Peterson returned to Canada to join the University of Toronto's psychology department, where he continued to teach and publish. His early lectures and research focused on personality, ideology, and the psychological underpinning of belief systems, though his methods and interpretations often drew a little bit of criticism for their eclecticism and lack of empirical grounding. A few years before that, in 1998, Peterson published his first book, Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief. But it received limited attention outside of academic circles and little niche intellectual groups and such. The central thesis is that stories and myths provide the framework through which individuals and societies navigate existential uncertainty, offering guidelines for behavior and belief, drawing heavily on the works of Carl Jung, Friedrich Nietzsche, Joseph Campbell. Peterson argued that mythological archetypes often reflect universal psychological truths and serve as a map for confronting chaos. The book proposes a dichotomy between two fundamental forces: order, represented by stability and tradition, and chaos, symbolized by me, or by uncertainty and the unknown. Peterson contends that meaning arises from the tension between these two forces, with the hero's journey, a la Joseph Campbell, a recurring theme in myths, acting as a metaphor for individual growth and the pursuit of purpose. In many regards, I see myself as the anti-Peterson, but in others I see myself as somewhat similar. So let's start with our similarities. We both believe in the power of myth, the power of narrative, the power of symbolism. We both like Nietzsche. We both believe that belief is a fundamental driver of human flourishing and of human misery. Yet we also diverge in many regards. Whereas Peterson was raised by a teacher and a librarian, I was raised by a con artist and his trophy wife. Not to disparage my mother, she is a very intelligent woman, but she was 20 years old when my 35-year-old dad seduced her. She hadn't had much time to form much of her own adult identity at that point. So whereas Peterson grew up in a home that valued books and reading, I grew up in a home that valued money and comfort. Whereas Peterson pursued higher education, I pursued a career in the then fledgling world of being an entertainer on YouTube. And though my work was always tinged with politics and philosophy, my primary goal was always to entertain. Are you entertained? Hope so. Whereas Peterson views chaos and order as oppositional forces, I view them as collaborative forces. Whereas Peterson seeks to overcome chaos and nihilism, I seek to use them as tools of self-discovery and social change. When Peterson looks at chaos, he sees a force to be tamed, an adversary to be subdued in the pursuit of order and meaning. To Peterson, chaos represents the unknown, the unpredictable, and the threatening aspects of existence that got to be controlled or transcended to preserve stability. His worldview places a high premium on hierarchy and structure as the antidotes to chaos, often framing the journey through life as a struggle to balance these opposing forces without succumbing to mean old nihilism. In contrast, I see chaos not as an enemy, but as a collaborator in the creative process. Chaos is the spark of innovation, the birthplace of new ideas, and the soil from which transformative change grows. Rather than seeking to overcome chaos, I aim to harness it, or be harnessed by it, to lean into its uncertainty and unpredictability as a way of fostering self-discovery and challenging social norms. Where Peterson might view chaos as a destabilizing threat to tradition, I see it as the force that destabilizes outdated traditions, making space for progress and for reinvention. When Peterson looks at nihilism, he sees a void to be filled, a threat to meaning and purpose that must be countered with structure and belief and tradition. To Peterson, nihilism represents a collapse of values, a descent into despair that leaves individuals and societies vulnerable to mean old chaos and destruction. He perceives nihilism as the enemy of human flourishing, a condition that must be overcome through the reassertion of meaningful narratives, often rooted in archetypes and mythology and hierarchy and time-tested frameworks of morality. In contrast, when I look at nihilism, I see an opportunity, a blank slate upon which new meanings and new identities and new systems can be created. Where Peterson sees a threat to stability, I see the freedom to question which has been accepted and to forge something entirely brand goddamn spanking new. Nihilism strips away illusions, exposing the constructed nature of our values and our systems, which allows for a deeper understanding of what it truly matters, of what it truly means, and of what truly matters. Rather than fearing nihilism, I welcome it as a tool for self-reflection, for transformation. By embracing the emptiness, we are free to reject the narratives that no longer serve us and to build new ones that align with our evolving understanding of the world. For me, nihilism is not the end of meaning, it's the starting point for reimagining it. The fundamental difference in how we view nihilism encapsulates a broader divergence in philosophy between Peterson and I. Peterson seeks to combat the void with order, while I see the void as a source of potential, a place to explore and to grow. Ironically, considering that Peterson claims to be a traditionalist, and I claim to be a progressive, my view of chaos is more in line with how the ancient world perceived it. I've mentioned this before, but the ancient Greeks saw chaos as a generative force, the primordial state from which all existence emerged. From chaos came the cosmos, order, structure, and life, suggesting that chaos and creation were intrinsically linked rather than oppositional. This understanding aligns more closely with my perspective of chaos as a wellspring of possibility, a necessary precondition for growth and for transformation. Perhaps the most stark difference between Peterson and I is how we each view Christianity and Christian dogma. For Peterson, Christianity is a cornerstone of Western civilization, a repository of timeless truths and archetypal wisdom that provides the moral and cultural foundation for human flourishing. He often defends Christian dogma as a narrative framework that offers individuals meaning and guidance in a chaotic world. Peterson's view of Christianity is less about theological belief and more about its symbolic and psychological significance. He sees the Christian story, particularly the figure of Christ, as embodying the archetype of the hero who sacrifices for the greater good, navigating chaos to bring about order. For me, while I recognize certain value in Christ as a philosopher, I think the mythology contained within the Bible is some of the most repugnantly anti-human drivel ever conceived of. Christianity is a poison that has warped our collective understanding of morality, meaning, and human potential. Its narratives, rather than inspiring growth or discovery, too often reinforce guilt, shame, and submission as virtues. The Christian emphasis on original sin, the inherent fallibility of humanity, and the glorification of suffering reflects a worldview that denies the fundamental dignity and potential of human beings. It fosters an obsession with obedience to God, to authority, to tradition. And that stifles the very creativity and exploration that I hold sacred. Unlike Peterson, who views Christianity as a stabilizing force against chaos, I see it as an agent of stagnation, an attempt to freeze human progress in the name of preserving order. It treats chaos as a threat to be extinguished, rather than as a fertile ground for transformation. My view of chaos, rooted in the ancient Greek conception, sees it as the raw material from which creativity and new beginnings arise. Christianity, with its rigid binaries of good and evil, seeks to snuff out that generative chaos, replacing it with dogma that leaves little room for growth. And that brings me to the title of this video. Jordan Peterson is ultimately a man ruled by fear. Jordan Peterson is afraid. Afraid of chaos, afraid of nihilism, afraid of change, afraid of growth. He is the greatest intellectual coward the world has ever known, and I sincerely hope that it's exactly how he goes down in the annals of history. If I am correct in my frequent assertion that we are now entering what I call the age of chaos, then that will indeed be his legacy, if indeed he has one at all. He will be seen largely as the dying gasp of an outmoded order that never should have been created in the first place. Christian dogma has been the architect of the age of living death, along with its modern-day cohort, capitalism. These two forces have conspired together to rob human life of any sense of true vitality or creativity or authenticity. They have shackled humanity to systems that prioritize obedience over innovation, conformity over individuality, and control over freedom. Together, Christianity and capitalism have cultivated a culture that fears chaos because chaos threatens the structures that keep those systems in place. Jordan Peterson, with his devotion to both, serves as their most vocal champion and, simultaneously, their most pitiful victim. Peterson's entire intellectual project is a reactionary attempt to defend a world order that is crumbling under its own weight. The age of chaos, as I call it, represents not a descent into ruin, but a chance at long last for liberation. A chance to dismantle the illusions and constraints imposed by these oppressive systems. Peterson cannot see this because to him, chaos is not an opportunity, but a threat. He clings desperately to the comforting certainties of dogma and hierarchy, unable to imagine a world beyond their limiting confines. His imagination is not a tool that he devotes to potential, but rather to fear. The uncertainty of the future petrifies him, and so he wishes to burrow like a tick into the flesh of his idealized notion of the past. This inability to embrace uncertainty is the cornerstone of his intellectual failure. His imagination, tethered to the past, is incapable of grappling with the complexity and dynamism of the present, let alone the possibilities of the future. He fails to recognize that the very traditions he seeks to preserve were born out of chaos, which he fears, and that clinging to them as immutable truths is just to misunderstand their nature entirely and utterly and desperately and pathetically and sadly and disgustingly. Sure do wish there was smoke coming out this cigarette, huh? You know, despite my profound disagreements with the guy, Jordan Peterson, and my belief that he is ultimately a fearful little bitch whose intelligence is squandered on what I view as a bunch of ignoble pursuits, I don't want to have you guys walking away thinking I'm here to vilify Peterson. I mean, I have serious criticisms of the man and profound disagreements with the philosophy that he preaches. But there are a great many things we do agree on. He has put forth some positive ideas to his audience. Some of those ideas are, they're of real value, right? He teaches the value of hard work, for example, instructing people to pursue their goals with relentless determination and drive, even when doubt starts to creep in. And I think that lesson is admirable and can genuinely help people when it comes to realizing their own potential. In a world often plagued by apathy and resignation, encouraging people to take some responsibility for their lives and to work towards self-improvement, well, that's a worthwhile pursuit. That's no small thing. I also appreciate his focus on the importance of narrative and myth. While I disagree with his exact application of those concepts, I share his belief that stories have immense power to shape our understanding of the world and our place within it. His ability to articulate the significance of archetypes and symbolism and the human need for meaning has undoubtedly sparked curiosity and reflection in many of his followers, even if his interpretations often lead to conclusions that I find, and I hate to use the word, but there's no other word, I find them problematic. The invitation to engage with these ideas is, at its core, valuable, right? And moreover, Peterson has drawn attention to the importance of mental health, particularly for young men, a group that has been stigmatized in that area for a long, long time. His willingness to address the struggles of disillusioned and alienated individuals and offer them some guidance, even if I find much of that guidance to be flawed, has undeniably resonated with those who feel unseen by our society. So for all of his faults, he has given many people the tools to begin reflecting on their lives and striving for better. I have in the past mocked Peterson for being essentially a self-help guru, peddling what are ultimately just your average motivational speeches with a veneer of philosophical pretense painted over them. Yet I have to say, in this age of depression and anxiety and malaise and disconnection, perhaps what he offers is exactly what some people need. The fact that his advice is often straightforward: clean your room, take responsibility, set goals. That doesn't necessarily diminish its value to those who are struggling to find structure or purpose in their lives, right? Motivational speeches have value. Being an unmotivated lump of shit serves nobody, right? Doesn't serve you, doesn't serve the world. And if all it takes is a rousing speech to get you up off your ass and out into the fray, hey, that's me. Then I'm all for it. Even if it does contain some dumb shit that I don't really agree with. I must confess, the main reason I made this video is in hopes that some Jordan Peterson fans would click on it. And if they have, then hopefully they're still watching and they're going to see this right now that I'm saying, because this part's for them. So if you are a Jordan Peterson stan, I got a few things that I'd like to say to you directly, okay? First off, I'm not trying to tell you to abandon Peterson. If he has helped you, then he has helped you. That's part of your journey as a person, and I have no interest whatsoever, in being a roadblock for you or for anybody else. That'd be very antithetical to my overarching message, don't you think? What I would like to do for you instead is remove a few roadblocks that I think Peterson might have put in your way. Probably not meaning to, because while most of Peterson's rules for life are, in my opinion, nothing too insidious or bad, there is one that I think is really not doing you any favors. In his first book of rules, he says, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. So this is the classic clean your room, bucko meme, right? How can you expect to set the world in order when you ain't even got your own shit in order? That's the premise. Well, I want to tell you something. That premise is dog shit. Plenty of people who were deeply flawed and whose personal affairs were not in order at all have changed the world and changed it for the better. Martin Luther King Jr., he was a cheater, he was a plagiarist. He struggled with depression, he had personal failings. Yet he became one of the most transformative leaders in modern history, advancing civil rights in the face of enormous resistance. Albert Einstein, by many accounts, had quite the chaotic personal life, marked by failed relationships, neglected responsibilities, etc. But his contributions to science changed our understanding of the universe forever. The idea that you gotta be some kind of mythical state of perfection sort of being before you can engage with or criticize the world is not only unrealistic, but it's goddamn counterproductive. The world doesn't need perfect people to affect change. It needs people who are willing to act despite their imperfections. Setting your house in perfect order is an impossible task. Perfection is unattainable. Life is inherently fucking messy. By implying that you gotta have everything in your personal life sorted out before you can contribute to the world, Peterson's rule risks paralyzing you in inaction, convincing you that you aren't good enough yet to make no change. And that's a dangerous and unnecessary roadblock to put in somebody's path. So if you're gonna discard one piece of Peterson, throw that shit in the fucking trash, because that ain't no good. What I want you to understand is this. You are allowed to be a work in progress and still engage with the world. You can criticize injustice, advocate for change, and contribute to something larger than yourself, even if your life is not perfectly organized. In fact, participating in those larger areas of life, those bigger causes, can actually bring some clarity and purpose to your own personal life and personal struggles. Growth does not happen in isolation. It happens in connection with others and through confronting the challenges all around you. And we got plenty of challenges in this world, believe me. Furthermore, I'm going to drop the accent for this because I don't know. Pause it for a second, Scotty. I want, even though my hair is fucking retarded, I'm going to take the wizard hat off. Take these fucking gloves off. Set this cigarette down. Furthermore, I want you to be prepared for what is to come. Because the chaos you've seen in the world to date is but a prelude to what's coming. The world is about to get a lot stranger, and by many metrics, a lot worse. I want you to be prepared to see this new world not as a maddening impediment, but as an opportunity. You are not merely a leaf on the river going with the flow of the stream and helplessly carried wherever it takes you. You are a force within the river, capable of shaping its course, navigating its currents, and even changing its direction. The chaos that lies ahead will challenge you, no doubt, but it will also present you with endless opportunities to grow, to create, and redefine yourself and the world around you. Yes, things will get harder. Systems that we have relied upon will falter. The rules we've lived by may no longer apply, but chaos is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the fertile ground from which new possibilities arise, the raw material for reinvention. While some of you will only see destruction and despair, I urge you to look for the cracks where the light gets in, to embrace the uncertainty as a chance to build something better. This is your call to step into the chaos, not with fear, but with curiosity and with courage. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be perfect. What you need is the willingness to engage, to question, to act, and to persist. The world is not something that happens to you. It's something that you're a part of, something that you have the power to influence, and we forget that all too often in this day and age. Remember that in the times of upheaval that are to come, those who can adapt, those who can imagine something new are the ones who are going to shape the future. So let the chaos be your invitation to think differently, to challenge what is, and to dream of what could be. Because when the world feels like it's falling apart, that's often when it's the closest to being remade. And you, with all your flaws and all of your potential, are exactly the kind of person that can help shape that new world. And I don't want you to forget that.
Don't hate this video. Rate this video. Don't lick the sink in the affliction. Click the link in the description. Don't imbibe this handle and shit the inert shell. Subscribe to this channel and hit the alert bell. Don't rank my brass and, never mind.